is a racist?
Let me tell you that, well, certainly her words would indicate that that is the truth. What else can I say? How else can, I can't look at her heart. I have nothing that can analyze her soul. All I can tell you, and it just exactly like the things I say are always, used about describing me in one way or the other. All of us in public life have to deal with that. And when you are looking to be on the Supreme Court, don't be surprised that if you say something like that, or if you belong to an organization called La Raza, in this case, which is, from my point of view anyway, just nothing more than a Latino, it's a counterpart, it's a Latino KKK without the hoods or the nooses. If you belong to something like that, you have to explain that in a way that's going to convince me and a lot of other people that it's got nothing to do with race, even though the logo for La Raza is all for the race, nothing for the rest.
All right, we're not talking about, you know what?
She's a member.
We're not
she's
talking
a member
about
of
La
La
Raza
Raza
here, though. We're talking about that specific
But she's
club.
a member.
But the thing that she's a member of.
Hello, senores y senoritas. Welcome to the MexSkeptical podcast, the voice of the resistance. My name is Fox Navarro, and I've had a hell of a week. I'm going to get to the main topic of this episode in a little bit, but first I want to talk about the big story, the election. I don't want to say too much about it because, what can I say that hasn't been said already? But I just want to tell my story. I mean, I'm shocked. I don't know what to tell you. There were a lot of emotional reactions in the room. I spent this election, because this was the first election that I was able to drive. I had a social life, so I went to a bunch of watch parties just to see how things were going. And I saw the emotions tensed up as the night went on. More states started going for Trump. The liberals, I was hanging out with Democrats for the most part. Well, there were some libertarians in the club. Either way, not a lot of Trump fans. But I felt despair. That was my initial reaction. My initial reaction was, oh my God, everything's going bad. Curtains falling, everything is going down. Now, thankfully, some of my anxiety about that has been alleviated. I think Trump, Obama, everyone's been acting really gracious to sort of accept the results and try and move on from this as much as they can. Yeah. I hung out with a couple friends of mine. We were sort of hopping from some watch parties to another. We went to a woman's house who's running for a seat on a local court. She won. And then we went to the local Hillary Clinton campaign office. Had this big screen and a lot of pastries, which was nice. And the trip was kind of bookended by this club. They're sort of an alternative club, and they're really cool. They had this TV up, but with rabbit ears, so the signal kept cutting out. And not usually a TV club. Anyway, so, our friends were just watching, and we saw, more results kept falling. We kept getting worried. This friend of mine, especially, she was expecting to, just go home by 9, secure that, hey, Clinton's got this in the bag. But that state started falling and falling. We were at that club until 1 o'clock in the morning, just desperately trying to sketch out, different paths to victory, potential ways for Hillary Clinton to break 270. By the time it was 1 in the morning, Central Standard Time, Pennsylvania had fallen, and we just saw there was no hope. So, my friend was despondent. She was just terribly anxious and worried because, this friend is a friend who needs health insurance to survive. And, like the plan was just all her future plans are in jeopardy now because of, what Trump has managed to dismantle. That's the initial reaction to the idea of a presidential candidate winning. I try to interject when I can with bits of good news, which I plan to do in the main segment here, but it wasn't that well received. And I don't blame them for not receiving it well. Yeah. I left the room and kind of screamed a little bit. I was just blaring the weirdest, punk music, some weird J-rock scandal. Just blasting it as loud as I could tolerate it in the car. I had my windows rolled down, just singing along, screaming. Then I went to a Whataburger and I got probably too much breakfast food than I should have, to be honest. I just needed to, sit the sorrow down with food. And then while I was in my car and driving all the way home, I listened to a god-awful movies episode just so I didn't have to be alone with my thoughts. It's a really good podcast. You should check it out if you want to be happy about something. But yeah, I got home about 2 a.m, I think. I checked my phone, and now it is breaking news report. Wisconsin had been called for Trump by, I don't know what agency. But that was the state that had pushed him past 270. Now, thankfully, Trump has been, again, he's been acting gracious. There's been conciliatory stuff. There's a lot of, protests, hate crimes, even riots, streets. I was actually supposed to go to a protest today, but it got rescheduled. I'm not sure what a protest, I'm not entirely convinced by its practicality. I don't think the Electoral College is going to overturn the Trump presidency. I don't even know if they should. I mean, it's a ridiculous system, but I don't know. I just don't think it's going to happen. I do think protesting is important. That way we can show our strength. And I do think it's important because I'm a Democrat. I voted for Bernie in the primary. I was pretty happy for him, but I fell to the Clinton train pretty early. I was a state delegate for her. I was, campaigning on her behalf, and I think she would have made a great president. But, the fact is, I kind of feel like the progressive wing is being betrayed by a bunch of, neoliberal corporatist type people who, they just didn't see this coming. They didn't understand. They didn't know how to properly rile up the progressive base. And I think, the choosing Tim Kaine was a big thing of that. Because, Tim Kaine is pretty neoliberal. I was, pissed off when he was first announced because, that was progressive rage, or, I wanted Warren or Castro, but no. And then I warmed up to him, and then he just, sunk in that debate. Then I got more mad. Then I got better, and now I'm just... sometimes it feels like I'm fuming. So, yeah. Dan Carlin, I listened to his podcast about this, and, he was right. If the Democratic Party were a company, we would have every right to say, fire everyone at the top, and then change the rules to make sure this doesn't happen again. Dan Carlin, his last episode, trumped. We should do something about this because I'm fuming. This was not supposed to be an easy loss. But, wow. I'm Wisconsin fell, Pennsylvania, the famed Pennsylvania. Remember when Texas was supposed to be a swing state? Oh, but that's the thing. Trump won Texas by 7 points. Mitt Romney won by 18 points. So, staying steadfast to liberalism is what we should be doing. We do need to have Keith Ellison as DNC chair. I don't know who's that New York Times editorial person said that, Democrats should just go with a Rust Belt to, pander to the, Trump constituency. And that's just, we've done that since, after Reconstruction. And we've done that since after the Nixon era sort of put a kibosh on the civil... No. Yeah, it was the Nixon era, put a kibosh on the civil rights thing. We didn't elect another Lyndon Johnson. We elected Jimmy Carter. And, who had very different attitudes towards social issues. So I think we need to stay steadfast to our liberalism. And at this point, I think everyone's going to realize sooner rather than later that Trump is a con artist. You've seen, the very clear nepotism in that he's giving his business to his kids. The kids are also on the transition team. That's not a conflict of interest at all. He might put Steve Bannon as chief of staff. That'll be hilarious. And New York Times has this thing about here's all the short list for the potential cabinet picks. And they're so terrible. I don't want fucking Ben Carson as Secretary of Education. I don't want a climate denier as head of the EPA. I don't want Giuliani to be Attorney General. And then, there are some, I guess, good things to that. That means he'll also probably break some of his crazier promises. He said that, he doesn't want to repeal all of Obamacare, or at least he's open to saving parts of it. And, he hasn't talked about the wall in a while. There's some people have. Fuck you, Louis Gohmert, you're not a real Texan. But he's been avoiding that. And then there's news that the Muslim ban had disappeared from his website, but no, that was actually just a technical error, and it's still back up. He punted on the question when a reporter asked him if he would still ban all Muslims. And, the news seems to be moving pretty fast these past few days, so hopefully that's clarified one way or another. It could even be clarified between the time I record this and the time I edit this. So, yeah, I'm all for just, we gotta, I think, just double down on progressivism. I would like it if the progressive wing of the Democratic Party just formed our own Tea Party coalition, or an equivalent. Because, I don't know, it worked, in scaring the Republican establishment to cater to them. So, I don't know. It's something I would like to see. Although, perhaps not quite so impractical. Because, I don't know. There are a couple things that in a Trump administration you could possibly look forward to. He wants to remove the TTP, which is pretty good. I have mixed feelings about the TTP, to be honest. So I might be peer pressured by my liberal friends on that. And he does kind of want to, and there's some indication that he does want to, move toward a less interventionalist stance, which, hey, if that's true, I'll take it. We've had a bipartisan consensus on foreign policy for a long time, and it hasn't really gotten us much good. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say. Just some brief words. I'm sure we'll get more news as they come along, and we'll see what comes up. But for now, the A segment. Down ballot races. The absolute shock of the fact that Trump got elected president distracts from all the down ballot races that occurred. And, there were a lot of them. We elected a whole bunch of new senators, some House people, a whole lot of ballot initiatives. So we're going to talk about that right now. I looked as many of them up as I could, and I mentioned all the ones that seemed to have a particular interest or relevance, especially if they were good news, I guess, to the more lefty constituency that probably doesn't listen to the show because I don't have listeners, but if they did, this is where they're at. Okay, so first up for the Senate. The Democrats won about 2 Senate seats, and the Senate's looking to go 52 Republican, 42 Democrat caucus, depending on how the race goes in Louisiana. Louisiana has a interesting system I would like to see nationwide, maybe, where if no candidate gets more than 50% in the general, the top 2 go to a runoff, and that runoff will be between the Democrat Foster Campbell and the Republican John Kennedy, his actual name. So we'll see. But Louisiana, it seems like a pretty safe Democrat seat, unless the Republican is embroiled in some interesting scandal. This is the race to try and replace David Vitter's seat. So, it's gonna have to be a big scandal. But yeah, we got a couple firsts in the Senate. We got Kamala Harris elected to replace Boxer's seat in California. half Indian, half black, first Indian woman in the Senate, and the first biracial. In Illinois, Mark Kirk lost his re-election bid to Tammy Duckworth, who is a combat veteran who lost both her legs in an IED in Afghanistan. Was it Afghanistan or Iraq? I'll edit that out. And she's also half Thai. So that's another big first for the Senate. And I actually think that Tammy Duckworth has a decent chance of being president in 4 years. I'm going to climb on that train right now. Of course, that's also as many years in the Senate as Obama was. I don't know. Something tells me after this, we might be wishing for some Obama. But yeah, for right now, I'm hitching my wagon to that train. I'm not sure if Bernie should run in 2020. I don't mean to be like, ageist about it, but it's a sincere concern. That being said, we'll see how his health is. He's always been a sort of energetic, agile man. I've never really seen him as vulnerable. And then, woohoo! The first Latina senator got elected to replace Harry Reid's seat. Nevada Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto replaced U.S. Representative Joe Heck. No, she beat Joe Heck in the campaign to replace Harry Reid's seat, in part due to, I assume, a big Latino turnout, which is really interesting because Joe Heck is actually kind of a moderate guy. He's got a lot of Mexicans who like him. But yeah, this is our first Latina senator, and she's Mexican. We have 3 Hispanic senators already, and they're all Cuban. It's awful. It's awful. And also, it's just a sort of an interesting first. A couple of firsts, actually. In Utah and Colorado, respectively, we had Misty Snow and Misty Plowright. Both of them were trans women running for a seat in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House, respectively. Now, they lived in pretty conservative districts, constituencies, so, they lost. Misty Snow, you're not going to beat Mike Lee in the state where he's become sort of that, next big conservative thinker, a guy who could easily become the Senate Republican leader in a couple years once McConnell finally dies, assuming he ever does. But yeah, and they're both trans, and I think the fact that, hey, they made it that far, that's, freaking incredible, and we didn't even make a big deal out of it. Probably because we didn't pay attention, to be honest, but, it's awesome. Jim Gray, he also ran for Senate in Kentucky. He's the openly gay mayor of Lexington. He lost to Rand Paul. Rand Paul is pretty popular in Kentucky. But hey, this is a gay man running in the South. Statewide race. And his sexuality wasn't even that big an issue. So, that's pretty good. For the state legislature, there's big news breaking out that, it got really shared. Ilhan Omar became the first Somalian woman to be elected as a lawmaker when she was elected to the Minnesota State House. She was, her family was refugees, and she's Muslim. She wears the hijab. And, that's, hey, freaking great. Community gets represented like that. I remember that, she beat out, this really, 40-year serving white woman in the primary battle, which is, real inspiring because Democrats don't often lose their primary battles. That's usually not a thing to fear. She wasn't particularly corrupt either, so I don't know how that happened exactly. But I guess she's a bright face. She's really good. Sam Park was recently elected as the first openly gay man in the Georgia legislature. He is of Korean descent, and he won his election by 800 votes. Don't let anyone tell you your vote doesn't matter. All right. And as for atheist and non-theist politicians, Ernie Chambers, the highest-ranking atheist politician who has a seat in the Nebraska State Senate. Ernie Chambers, our favorite guy. He got reelected pretty easily. And for those of you who don't know, Ernie Chambers is the loud-talking, T-shirt-wearing, the guy who sued God, the guy who has been working hard to get the death penalty repealed in Nebraska, which I guess spoiler alert for future in the episode. Nebraska had a ballot initiative to try and reinstate its death penalty, but the wording was kind of confusing because it was like, repeal the law that says repeal the death penalty. So yeah, it was a little bit confusing, and then long story short, the death penalty is back in Nebraska, which has to suck for Ernie, but whatever. But we also got a new face in a upper state legislature. Juan Mendez, fellow MexSkeptical, he's Hispanic, and he's an atheist, and he's now in the Arizona State Senate. He won his seat. I've never met him, but he's welcome on the show anytime. I don't know how to interview guests on this show. I'll figure it out. It's Skype, right? It's always Skype. And he's a pretty prominent, like, humanist activist, too. He's, like, delivered secular invocations at his city meeting. He sort of wears his not faith on his sleeve. Yeah, this is a really good guy. I look forward to seeing what he has to do. Hopefully he makes a run for the U.S. House seat in a couple years, because he seems like a pretty young guy. Also, people who won races are also non-theists. Anthea Salmon and Melissa Sargent. Congratulations to those two for winning your races and doing the good. Actually, I didn't write down. I should have written them down. It's not State House. It's not as romantic as State Senate. Oh, well, screw me. And then for the U.S. House, Jamie Raskin, openly humanist, Jewish. It's not quite clear, but he's used the humanist word, and that's I'll fucking take it. He won a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. I believe he replaced Chris Van Hollen's seat in the House. It was that or Donna Edwards. Man, I wanted Donna Edwards to freaking win that primary. Fuck you, Chris Van Hollen. For governor's races, we have a couple of interesting results. The state of Oregon elected the nation's first LGBT governor with Kate Brown, an openly bisexual woman. She first became governor 2 years ago. Wait, is that 2 years ago or 1 year ago? Anyway, she first became governor when the actual governor of Oregon had to resign his position due to some scandals involving his wife and lobbyists. Kate Brown, who was then Secretary of State, was next in line to fulfill the position. She's done a lot of things that make liberals' hearts melt, including automatic voter registration and other stuff I'm not thinking of. I should have written it down. Either way, the openly bisexual Kate Brown was now validated due to the special election in Oregon that caused her to win her governorship legitimately. In North Carolina, Pat McCrory, the homophobic piece of shit who signed the HB 2 law and pretty much encouraged it in, as well as a bunch of other campaign falsehoods, including signing abortion restrictions when he said in a debate that he would not, has lost his re-election bid. But it's not that satisfying because Roy Cooper won by about, it was a couple hundred or a couple thousand votes. It was a very thin margin that Roy Cooper, the Democrat, had won his seat. Either way, it's really telling that the Democrat won the governor in North Carolina in the same state that Donald Trump carried on the presidential level. So that does say something about how toxic the Pat McCrory brand has now become as a result of that. Also in the U.S. House of Representatives, Stephanie Murphy from Florida became the first woman of Vietnamese descent elected to the U.S. House. Also, Pramila Jayapal became the first, I fucked that name up, Pramila Jayapal from the state of Washington became the first Indian woman elected to the U.S. House. Congratulations to them both. We need more representation like this. And now the fun stuff. Ballot initiatives. 4 states voted to legalize pot. 3 states voted to legalize medical marijuana. And 1 state voted to reduce the restrictions on existing medical marijuana laws. That's right. By ballot measure, the states of California, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine voted to legalize pot, while the state of Arizona did not. I'm not sure why Arizona didn't, though I'd have thought, for some reason I guess I thought there was more like Southwest trash, or I thought that would boost turnout. But honestly, part of me is kind of not even sure who's opposing legalization at this point. I mean, it's happened in a lot of states. It's been legal on a medical level for about 20 years now. And, the world hasn't fallen apart. I don't, yeah. I think they should just be better with it. And the states of Florida, Arkansas, North Dakota have all agreed to allow medical marijuana to be sold and prescribed. And this is really good because I remember there was a medicinal pot law in Florida either 2 or 4 years ago, and that got rejected. Pretty soundly, I believe. Or just barely. It was one of the two. It's always one of the two. But yeah, now Florida agreed with it, and I think that's absolutely great news. And the state of Montana had voted to loosen the regulations on existing medical marijuana dispensaries and farmers. Congratulations, big day for Green and potential overturning of the war on drugs. The states of California, Nevada, and Washington voted for increased gun control measures, while the state of Maine did not. It's really interesting that California, I figure, is already a pretty liberal state. Seems a lot harder to get a firearm there than in Texas. Nevada, though, that really surprised me. I didn't think the rural folk would not be so into it, but I guess it was the phrasing of the question, or maybe they just got big turnout. Either way, definitely good for them. Maine is just, I don't know, Maine's an awful state full of weird farmer stuff. It doesn't make sense. 3 states voted to increase minimum wage. Colorado, Arizona, and Washington voted to increase their minimum wages, which were already higher than the federal level, whereas the state of South Dakota rejected a measure to reduce the minimum wage for persons under the age of 18. So, yeah. And that's the interesting thing about it. These are Trump won, but he didn't win by popular vote. And a bunch of these states, do support liberal policies. So, hey, liberals, not all hope is lost. You can rebound from this. The states of Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota voted to add victims' rights amendments to their state constitutions, which I think is a good idea. In Texas, we have a victim rights amendment, which basically, it just says that if you're a victim in a crime, you have these rights in the court system. I think it's very good in protecting, the most vulnerable people in the criminal justice system. Alabama voted to become a non-union right-to-work state. It's Alabama. California voted to increase tobacco taxes to pay for health care. Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. Tobacco causes a lot of people to go to the hospital sometimes. And California also voted to enable school districts to allow for bilingual education, which I think is really good. That, helps to accommodate more of the students who aren't, they don't speak English quite so well. Yeah, I live in the border, and Spanglish is a pretty big thing. It's not in the official language. It's more of a regional dialect, in both English and Spanish speakers that sort of get it. And, I think because it's so influenced by another language and so plainly, that it's often looked down upon or seen as sort of weaker or, hey, you're dumb, don't speak English. But yeah, that shouldn't be that at all. And I'm glad this thing passed. And, California is really moving back from, Prop 108. Freaking Pete Wilson. Was it 108? Or was it 182? It was one of those. That weird anti-immigration prop. That's the reason that no Republicans are in California anymore. Pushback was strong on that one. Colorado also voted down, you may have heard this, that Colorado wanted to implement universal health care by adding a payroll tax, and that was pretty soundly rejected, 79% to 21%. And yeah, I think that's probably for the best. I don't know. I don't think a universal healthcare system in this country will work unless we start to rein in the parts of our healthcare system that are, for profit. Because, if, the government is paying the tab, then, we're just going to have healthcare industry running the prices up, and then that just doesn't work so right. So we have to make sure that, we sort of rein in these industries before we do it. Although, it was a very well-intentioned thing. There's a part of me that's sad we didn't get to see it come to fruition. But, if we do want universal healthcare, we're going to have to work a lot harder at that. Washington, D.C. voted to have its city council petition that the District of Columbia becomes a new state called, I believe, the State of Columbia, New Columbia. I'm not sure. Either way, it's a thing that says we want statehood, and I totally expect this Republican Congress to do it. Totally expect them to do it. Florida voted for an amendment that made solar panels more accessible to people to use for their own homes, which is great. Why be on the grid all the time? Ha ha ha. Missouri got a lot of, I guess, more bad news out of Missouri. Missouri didn't voted to reject any cigarette taxes to pay for health care. Missouri also voted that yes to having voters show ID at the polls. But they also voted for an amendment that increases the regulations on campaigners and lobbyists and stuff. So that's pretty good. Pretty good. I like it. New Jersey rejected an amendment that would have expanded the legalization of gambling to 2 different counties in the city. I guess no one wants a casino in their house, and probably a good way. I don't know what Atlantic City is, but it probably not doing so good. Oklahoma rejected an amendment that would have removed the separation of church and state from the state constitution. Yeah, the after that 10 Commandments statute got ordered to be taken down from Oklahoma, the Oklahomans wanted the people to vote on whether to remove an amendment that would say that city and state resources cannot be used to promote religion. And Oklahomans soundly rejected that, which I am a fan of. I like it. Also on the ballot, Rhode Island voters voted to approve a state-owned casino in one of their counties. That's weird that the state runs casinos. Although I guess it's probably not that different. It's kind of weird to me that the state runs the lottery. This is just the government just encouraging a vice. Doesn't seem right to me. Maybe. Virginia voted to not become a right-to-work state. Thank you to Tim Kaine for that one. And Washington voted down a flawed, in my opinion, carbon tax. The carbon tax would have the money that went from it would go back to the companies to help offset the costs of going green. And, conservatives didn't like that because, it was they saw an undue environmental regulation. And liberals didn't like that because they thought it didn't penalize the companies enough. So, no one was really happy about it, so it failed, and that's pretty good. And that's actually the whole thing. This episode is not as long as I thought it would be. Oh, well, shorter episode today. Shorter episode. Okay, hey there, before I end the show, I just wanted to record this next little bit of audio just to clarify some things that happened since yesterday evening. I saw Keith Ellison on Meet the Press this morning. I do think that, he is still the strongest, the best candidate, I think, to take us in, to take the Democratic Party in a good direction that should hopefully speak to working class people without being, having us dragged along. I don't want the Democratic Party to be just anti-conformist to the Republican Party. I don't think that's a good way to go. Also, Kevin McCarthy said recently that the agenda moving forward doesn't include any investigations on Hillary Clinton. So, and then what Trump said, he wasn't even thinking about a special prosecutor that hard. So, yeah, thankfully, jailing one's political opponent probably won't happen. That being said, I don't even know how much of an influence she's going to be anymore. Especially if the Bernie-crats take over the party. And then Donald Trump has made comments. He's still sort of uncertain about the Muslim ban thing. We haven't heard about that. He has said that he does want to deport 3 million people initially, or about 2 to 3 million. He wants to focus on the illegal immigrants who have apparent crimes beyond just not being in the country without documentation. And I don't think the number of undocumented immigrants who are criminals is as high as that. I don't think that's the case. So, yeah, he's just giving a really high estimate. And then he also said that the border wall would actually be part fence. So, I mean, what's going on? He's already deterring off from message. You know what he said? He wanted those millions of people, 11, 12 million out of the country immediately. That's clearly not happening. Also, according to Politico, the race for the new governor, the race for the governor of North Carolina is still uncalled, but the Democrat Roy Cooper is still leading, as is the election to the seat of Darrell Issa. Issa holds an advantage, but apparently they haven't counted all the votes yet. So that'll be interesting. Hopefully in the next few days they'll call that and we'll find out for sure. I remember seeing Eric Holder on Bill Maher. The first thing Eric asked was, did Issa lose his election? It made me laugh. That guy just gives no fucks. You were underrated as Attorney General. But anyway, that's going to do it all for this show. Be sure to follow the MexSkeptical Twitter account. Share it with your friends if you want to encourage this madness. If you have any listener feedback or topics for discussion, please give it to me. I'm not sure what entirely to do next. This could just become a headline show with me being snarky, but I'm not sure. And remember, don't feel too broken down. There are reasons to be optimistic. There are dark days ahead of us, but there are bright days over yonder. We're still here. Let's keep calm and carry on or something. Okay, I'll play the outro music. I don't know what else to say. Let's play the outro music. One last thing. Right after I recorded that last bit, I turned to my TV, and then it says, NBC sources, Trump picks Reince Priebus as chief of staff. So, probably not going with Steve Bannon, which is good for society. Yeah, that's pretty much it.